Haunted Mansion. Why am I doing Haunted Mansion? I'll tell you why I'm reviewing this movie. Because if I didn't review this movie, I would forget it existed entirely. A little spoiler for the review. Now, let's start with the fun, or the lack thereof. And as a little background on myself, I love Halloween. I get so excited for it, I go hard every single year. And as the Halloween connoisseur that I am, I know that all Halloween movies must fit into one of two boxes. Either one, they must be scary, or two, they must be a lot of fun. Haunted Mansion does not fit into any of these boxes. And this is what's so crazy about this movie, is how do you mess that up? The premise is so simple. These characters are visiting a haunted mansion and some spooky stuff happens. And somehow, they managed to make that premise boring. There were so many times in this movie that I was sitting there wondering when the runtime was going to come up. And I'm not harsh on movies at all. I enjoy a lot of movies. It's not easy for me to get bored during a movie. But they managed, which is the most impressive thing about this movie. Now, to the film's credit, it does try to do a couple of these different things. There are moments in this movie that are built up to be tense or scary, but the problem is none of the characters within the movie are actually scared in those moments. Almost everything is played for laughs, which is a common critique you can throw at any movie, but especially when you're trying to be scary, you just can't have characters who don't take it seriously. There's one scene at the very beginning, the first spook of the whole movie, and a character's walking down the hallway, and then this giant ghost comes out. She doesn't believe in ghosts, and she says, "No," and she turns around and runs away. It's completely devoid of any emotion whatsoever, and it really set the tone for this movie that it was going to try to be funny instead of spooky, which is fine, but if you're going to try to be funny, you have to be funny, and we'll get to that in a little bit. First, I want to talk about the theme of the movie and a little bit of the plot structure. The whole plot structure is not so dissimilar from the first Haunted Mansion movie with Eddie Murphy, if you ever saw that one. Essentially, characters go into a haunted mansion, they end up getting stuck there for one reason or another, and then they have to figure out a way to get out and defeat the ghost, blah, 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 blah. It's pretty generic as far as haunted movies go, which is not a problem, I don't think. I think any movie can be a little bit generic. It doesn't have to be wholly unique. But it does need to do something unique to set it apart from other movies, and I just don't feel like this movie did this. In fact, I think it did a very poor job of utilizing its theme in general. There are so many scenes of this movie that feel like they could take place anywhere. There's no ghosts, there's no real threat of ghosts. It's a complete underutilization of what this could have been, which is a fun movie with a lot of ghosts and a lot of goofs and gaffs. But instead, it kind of just feels like characters all just sitting in a manor for an hour and a half doing kind of nothing. Now, to give the movie its props, I will say there are a few Easter eggs in there. If you're a fan of the Haunted Mansion ride at Disney, you might catch some of those. Also, the music, I think, was a lot of fun. Grim Grinning Ghosts is kind of the theme of the movie, but they don't use the lyrics until the very end at this big dance sequence. I thought they did a really good job using music to elevate scenes, which really underscores how, if they didn't have the music right, how bad this would have been. But I will also say there are a few funny moments in the movie. It's not completely devoid of any humor whatsoever. Particularly Owen Wilson and Danny DeVito were some standouts of this movie. They had by far the funniest lines, and they actually got a good chuckle out of me a couple of times. There were, however, quite a few jokes that just did not land with me or anyone else in the theater. But I will say there was one person sitting behind me who was cracking up the entire time. So if you think you might be like that guy, then you might have a good time with this movie. And moving forward a little bit more into the themes of the movie and kind of the plot in general, like I said, it's pretty generic, nothing going to break your bones or surprise you. But I will say there were some interesting dynamics, especially around the main character. The main character, played by Lakeith Stanfield, he was going through some anxiety in the movie. And it was a lot about him processing his grief and moving on from those anxious moments. And I found that to be a very interesting message to put into a movie like this, especially a movie dedicated towards kids. I think there's a lot of value in that, and I really did appreciate that, even though I don't think they went quite far enough with it to really make that kind of stick in for the viewer. And I will say Lakeith Stanfield himself, he did a good job portraying that character. And I've already covered Owen Wilson, and Danny DeVito, but I think they did a wonderful job. Who I was let down by, surprisingly, was Rosario Dawson. And granted, that might just be the script, it might just be her direction, but her character didn't really have very much to do in the movie. She was just kind of there as a plot device, and then to try to add in some humor. But there was no kind of emotion, and it was her kid that was stuck in the haunted mansion with her. So you would have thought there'd be a little bit more to that. But she seemed perfectly fine the whole movie, and I would have liked to see a little bit more out of her. Now, who we do have to talk about is Jared Leto. Who put Jared Leto in this movie? Who's putting Jared Leto in all these movies? I just want to say, anytime Jared Leto's on screen, it's a jump scare. And I'm not talking about in the context of the movie, I'm just talking about seeing Jared Leto on the screen. I don't know why he's in this. His character is a CG ghost that looks nothing like him and has very few speaking parts. So it kind of feels like they just grabbed the first cheap enough name brand actor they could out of their little bag of goodies and then put him in a movie. But I guess he did fine, but honestly, I think I would have preferred to just see someone else entirely in there. It felt kind of like a waste to me. So in conclusion, Haunted Mansion. What a waste of 2 hours. I had much higher hopes going into this. I was not expecting a blockbuster hit or anything like that, but I was expecting a fun time. I was expecting a little bit more humor, a little more playfulness with the ghost, a little bit more done with that theme, something to get me excited for Halloween. But I guess I shouldn't have expected that for a Halloween movie coming out in July. And if I had to wrap this movie up with one sentence, it would just be, I don't think it went far enough. It didn't go far enough with the scares. It didn't go far enough with the fun. It didn't go far enough with its messages about anxiety or grief. It felt like a very middle of the road movie they just kind of pumped out, presumably so that it could go to Disney Plus for October. And that's kind of how it'd be remembered. It's already not doing well at the box office, and that is not a surprise to me at all. So if I had to give this a final score, I would say skip. It's not really worth your time. Even if you're a huge Halloween fan like me, you might have some good moments out of this, but I don't think it's worth the price of admission. Maybe catch it on Disney Plus one day down the road, but I don't even know if it's worth that. So thank you all for watching. I appreciate your time. Hope you all have a good day, and I'll see you later.